For 31 don't want to go to jail. When Yu Bing entered and didn't see Wen Qin, she collected some soil at the foot of the wall of the bathroom. Because this house had not been lived in for that long, it was a little dark and damp. Therefore, Wen Qin had bought some lime powder a while ago and sprinkled it along the wall to remove the dampness. Although there wasn't much lime powder mixed in the soil, the eyes were the weakest point of the human body and the lime powder was a strong alkaline substance. Sun Gua immediately felt a burning sensation in his eyes. He, who only had one eye to begin with, panicked and immediately let go of Yu Bing. Yu Bing was worried that there was still soil containing lime powder around her, so she grabbed the table and hurriedly stood aside before daring to open her eyes. Madame Sun didn't expect such a huge change in the situation, so she stood up and helped Sun Gua up quickly. Looking at her son's red eyes, Madame Sun gritted her teeth and asked sternly, "Yu Bing, what did you do to my son?" Yu Bing sneered. "I gave you guys some lime powder. If you guys want to cause trouble, I'll help you guys torture yourselves." Madame Sun wanted to rush over and fight Yu Bing, but Yu Bing hurriedly took a step back to distance herself. However, she stepped on something and almost fell. When Madame Sun saw what had tripped Yu Bing, her heart skipped a beat. She hurriedly pulled Sun Gua out of the door and cried as she walked. "Son, I will bring you to the doctor immediately. I will seek justice for you later." Yu Bing found it a little strange that Madame Sun had retreated so quickly. However, when she thought about how they had not gained anything from her, she couldn't be bothered to chase after them. When she looked down at the red brick, she thought it looked familiar. Then, she turned to look at the table leg that had been raised on one side of the table and felt even more puzzled. Yu Bing bent down to pick it up and was about to stuff it back when she realized that there was a dark color on it. Yu Bing felt even more uneasy, as if she missed some important clues. The red brick that had been thrown to the side, the strange reaction of the Sun family's mother and son, Wen Qin, who had suddenly been let out by Madame Sun to look for her, and the smell of blood. After Yu Bing turned around, she realized that she was very close to the closet and the rusty smell seemed to be coming from there. Yu Bing's eyes flickered and she suddenly realized the truth. Then, she quickly stepped forward and opened the closet. After the Sun family mother and son ran all the way to the river, Sun Gua kept washing his eyes with the flowing river water. Because the lime powder had been placed for a long time and mixed with the soil, it didn't affect Sun Gua that much after it was washed away in time. After confirming that there was nothing wrong with Sun Gua's eyes, the mother and son began to worry about Wen Qin's body being discovered. Sun Gua grabbed his mother's arm and said with a long face, "Mom, what should we do? I don't want to go to jail." His plan had been disrupted time and time again. Before he went out, he had delusions of obtaining Yu Bing and living a good life afterwards. Now, he only hoped to escape the crime of murder. Madame Sun was also very flustered. As she looked at her middle-aged son, who was still unable to support himself, she felt even more vexed and pointed at Sun Gua's head. "What's the use of you? Giving birth to a piece of barbecue is better than giving birth to you." She could eat barbecue when she was hungry, but Sun Gua would only find trouble for her. If not for the fact that she only had this one son, Madame Sun would have given up on him long ago. Sun Gua was used to his mother's domineering attitude. Although he was indignant, he didn't dare to retort. He knew that if he wanted to be safe, he still had to rely on his mother. As Madame Sun looked at the Yi mountain village behind her, she was silent for a moment before saying fiercely with a dark expression, "Let's go home first. As long as we insist that we didn't do anything, the police won't be able to do anything to us. If they say that we killed someone, they have to take out the evidence. If Yu Bing dares to be nosy and call the police, we'll accuse her." Madame Sun glanced at Sun Gua's dirty black shirt. "Hurry up and wash your clothes when we get back. It'll be troublesome if they find out that you're stained with blood." The two of them returned to the village and stayed there uneasily for 3 days. When nothing happened during those 3 days, they were relieved. The mother and son discussed softly as they ate dinner. "Mom, do you think perhaps Yu Bing didn't notice?" Madame Sun took a bite of the mixed grain bun as she said nonchalantly, "Why worry about so much? It's good that she didn't find out. If she did, she probably wouldn't have dared to make a fuss. Isn't she afraid that the police will suspect her first? Remember, when the police come to ask questions, say that we went to see our grandson and settle the divorce agreement that day." Not long after Xiao Hui went out, Wen Qin saw that Yu Bing had yet to come and said that she wanted to go out to look for her herself. After that, we only saw Yu Bing return alone. Then, when we wrote the agreement, we left because we couldn't reach an agreement on the additional alimony. We have to emphasize that Yu Bing stayed at Wen Qin's house alone in the end. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 432 Malicious Ghost. When Sun Gua heard this, he frowned and asked, "What about my eyes?" Madame Sun picked up a pickled veggie and asked impatiently, "Do you care more about your life or taking revenge on her?" As long as she exposes us for setting her up, our true motive will be exposed. It will contradict what we said previously. If we're discovered, we can forget about escaping. When Sungwoo heard this, he didn't dare to say anything else. He could only consider himself unlucky. Because of Wenqing's incident, the two of them had been very well behaved these few days. They didn't go anywhere except to the fields. Not long after dinner, they went to bed and prepared to sleep. Sungwoo was lying on his side and sleeping soundly when he suddenly felt a cool breeze beside his ear. He opened his eyes in a daze and saw a pregnant woman standing 3 meters away, staring at him. The woman's face was pale, and her eyes were bleeding. 2 5-centimeter-long fangs protruded from her mouth. "Ghost! Mom! Mom!" As Sungwoo shouted in terror, he crawled to the bed beside the wall, as if this would increase his sense of security. He shouted for a few more minutes before realizing in despair that Madame Sun didn't respond. As the wind blew against the closed window, Sungwoo felt even more terrified. The woman seemed to have noticed that Sungwoo was a little tired from shouting, so she moved closer to Sungwoo, scaring him so much that he cried out, "Don't come over! Don't come over! I'm begging you!" The woman said in a monotone voice, "Do you recognize who I am?" The moonlight shone through the window, but the light was still very dim. Sungwoo couldn't see the woman's facial features clearly, but he really couldn't think of anyone else who would look for him if she turned into a ghost. Moreover, her hairstyle and clothes were exactly the same as Wenqing on the day she died. "Yes, yes. Wenqing, on account that Xiaohui still needs someone to take care of him, please spare me." The woman revealed a smile, but the other muscles on her face looked stiff and didn't move. That made her entire face look even creepier. Her sinister voice sounded again, "What did you do that you want me to let you off?" Sungwoo was so frightened that he peed his pants as he cried and said, "I didn't do it on purpose. I accidentally killed you." When the woman heard this, she asked angrily, "You threw me into the closet without even rescuing me. How is this an accident? Tell me. Why did you look for me that day?" The wind outside seemed to be controlled by the woman's mood. The wind that had slowly stopped began to blow again, scaring Sungwoo so much that he hurriedly replied, "It was useless to save you since you were dead. I wanted to divorce you that day. I wanted to fulfill your wish." Even though Sungwoo was frightened out of his wits, he still didn't reveal his true motive that day. He had a feeling that if he revealed his true motive, he might anger the other party. He couldn't fight against a malicious ghost, so he might as well euphemize his goal. Perhaps Wenqing would spare him. When the woman saw that Sungwoo was unwilling to reveal his true motive, she was a little anxious. However, she had an idea and moved to the bed. Accompanied by Sungwoo's even more intense screams, the woman rolled her eyes as she said in a low voice, "You still refuse to tell the truth? Do you know why your mother didn't come to look for you? Do you want a straightforward death, or do you want to live a life worse than death?" The woman really seemed like a malicious ghost. In addition, Madame Sun was a light sleeper. Sungwoo had been howling for so long, but his mother didn't respond, so he already suspected that she had been killed by the malicious ghost that Wenqing had turned into after her death. Now that he heard this, he confirmed his guess. Sungwoo's fear had already reached the max and he couldn't hold it in anymore. Instead of being tortured like this, he would rather die early and be reincarnated. "I'll tell you." Sungwoo made up his mind and told her about his and Madame Sun's plan with his eyes closed. After saying that, Sungwoo still didn't dare to open his eyes. He cried and continued to beg, "Wenqing, Xiaohui no longer has a mother. Without a father, he will become an orphan. He will be bullied if no one protects him. Please let me take care of him. Don't worry, Xiaohui will only lose his father and won't become an orphan." A mocking voice sounded in Sungwoo's ear. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 433 Seeing Things. Sungwoo slowly opened his eyes. At this moment, a ray of light shone straight on Sungwoo's face. Sungwoo reflexively raised his hand to block the light. 2 men in police uniforms raised their badges. "Sungwoo, we're police officers from the police station. You're suspected of murdering Wenqing. Please come with us." Sungwoo widened his eyes and stared blankly at the police officer who suddenly appeared. After confirming that the other party was a living person, he climbed to the bed to look at the other party's identification. After confirming his identity, he swallowed nervously. "You. What right do you have to arrest me? Do you have evidence?" Sungwoo still had the last bit of hope. If he didn't admit to what he said just now, so what could they do to him? At this moment, half of the woman's body was exposed from the side and she looked at Sungwoo with a smile. "Do you think you can deny it?" Under the light of the flashlight, Sungwoo saw who the other party was and exclaimed, "Yu Bing." Seeing that Sungwoo had recognized her, Yu Bing sneered and went forward to slap Sungwoo twice. It's me. You bastard. Wen and you have been husband and wife for so many years and she has worked so hard for your family, but you didn't even try to save her after you injured her. How heartless. She still has your child in her stomach. Do you know that your actions could have killed them? Seeing that you being a woman dared to bully him in front of other men, Sungwoo's first reaction was to hit her back. The police officer at the side immediately grabbed Sungwoo's arm. Sungwoo, what are you trying to do? Don't you think your crimes are serious enough? When Sungwoo heard the police's scolding, he felt extremely aggrieved. He pursed his lips and asked, "Why didn't you say anything when she hit me just now?" One of the police officers coughed lightly when he heard this. Who hit you? The light was too dim just now. You were just seeing things. These two police officers were the police officers in charge of Wenqing's case. During the visit and investigation, they had learned a lot about the Sun family's mother and son. Just now, they had heard with their own ears how Sungwoo had planned all of this, so they couldn't sympathize with such a person and even felt that Yu Bing had gone easy on them. When Sungwoo heard this, he felt that he definitely wouldn't be able to escape this time. However, he thought of Madame Sunday. His mother definitely wouldn't leave him alone. She still had to rely on him to take care of her, so she definitely had a way. At the thought of this, Sungwoo felt more at ease. Where's my mother? I want to see my mother. The police officer glanced at Sungwoo and said calmly, she's outside. Hurry up. We don't have so much time to waste with you. When Sungwoo heard this, he hurriedly got up and put on his coat. When he went to the courtyard, he saw his mother gagged and handcuffed as she stood beside Xiaosheng. Sungwoo opened his eyes slightly. When he saw the scene in front of him, he didn't know how to react. The police officer pushed Sungwoo's shoulder. Let's go. You and your mother have to go back to the police station to explain. There will be many opportunities for you two to meet. After Sungwoo came back to his senses and looked at the police officer, he saw the other party walking past him with a heavy machine. This time, they drove a small car. The six of them returned to the police station of the commune in the middle of the night in less than half an hour. After Madame Sun regained her freedom, the first thing she did was scold Yu Bing, you little bitch. What right do you have to say that we killed Wenqing? I can say that you killed her. My son and I left long ago. You were the last one to leave. Who knows what you did after that? Yu Bing smiled coldly and said, you still want to frame me now? Your son confessed everything. You should have been able to hear him clearly in the courtyard, right? Sungwoo immediately denied it. What did I say? I didn't say anything. The police are in cahoots with you. When Madame Sun saw that her son was quite smart this time, she revealed a gratified expression. That's right. Your food factory has a good relationship with the police, so your testimony can't be trusted. Yu Bing raised her hand and began to clap as she said with a smile, you guys won't shed tears until you see the coffin, right? Don't worry, we have a lot of evidence. As long as you're stubborn enough, the police will show them to you later. Sungwoo and Madame Sun exchanged looks and suddenly felt uneasy. As Madame Sun looked at Yu Bing smirk, she gritted her teeth in hatred and said, if you don't have evidence but want to slander us, I'll sue you. The old policeman was the one who dealt with Madame Sun and Yu Yin last time. Seeing this, he interrupted Madame Sunday, I'll bring you to the interrogation room to record your statements first. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 434 Punishment. This wasn't the first time Madame Sun had taken a statement. Thinking of the small room, she immediately refused. No. I want to record my statement in the hall. There were two other police officers on duty in the hall. Madame Sun was worried that this old police officer would help Yu Bing. If he closed the case even without evidence, what would happen to her reputation? She thought that the other party wouldn't dare to openly side with Yu Bing in public. Of course, Yu Bing knew what Madame Sun was thinking. She turned around and asked the two police officers to see if they could interrogate her directly in the hall. The interrogation system in this era wasn't as standard as that of the future. In addition, it was early in the morning and no one would call the police in the middle of the night. Moreover, Yu Bing had been entrusted by Wenqing to cooperate with the police. In the end, the Sun family successfully obtained the opportunity to be interrogated in the hall. This time, when Madame Sun asked for evidence, the police took out a tape recorder that played the conversation between Yu Bing and Sungwoo. Madame Sun and Sungwoo's eyes widened. This was the first time they had seen something that could record voices. Madame Sun looked at the police and Yu Bing warily. Then, she leaned closer to her son and frowned as she asked in a low voice, you're not some high-ranking official, so why were you recorded? Sungwoo didn't know about recording functions either, so he scratched his head and thought for a moment before replying, I don't know either. Only the village chief's house has this thing. I've only heard songs being played from this thing. Yu Bing watched as the two of them muttered softly. Then, she raised her eyebrows and asked, you didn't expect what you said to be recorded, right? The evidence is conclusive. What else is there to say? If Madame Sun was so easy to defeat, she wouldn't be Madame Sun. She immediately argued, you pretended to be a ghost to scare my son. He was so frightened that he spouted nonsense. That's like forcing a confession. It doesn't count at all. Yu Bing chuckled as she mocked, then what kind of evidence do you want? Tell me and I'll see if I have it. When Madame Sun heard this, she immediately thought of a piece of evidence that they definitely couldn't produce. Unless someone saw it with their own eyes. Yu Bing sneered, her eyes filled with coldness. Are you trying to say that only what Wen-Qin saw with her own eyes is the truth? Madame Sun revealed a smug smile. You're right. A meaningful smile appeared on Yu Bing's face and a handwritten letter from the police was handed over. The old policeman took the letter he had just received yesterday afternoon. This is a letter written by Wen-Qin herself. It clearly states what happened before and after Wen-Qin was injured. It also clearly mentions that Sun Guo bashed her head, causing her life to be in danger. As Madame Sun and Sun Guo stared at the letter in the old policeman's hand, they were both surprised and afraid. Wen-Qin isn't dead? Yu Bing felt terrible when she thought of Wen-Qin's miserable state in the hospital. She looked at the Sun family's mother and son coldly. You guys dodged a bullet. You guys can avoid the death sentence, but you can't escape punishment. For villains like you guys, the death sentence is too lenient. Officer, I want to pursue their crime of attempted rape. In the previous recording, Sun Guo personally revealed their plan. Moreover, Sun Guo used a handkerchief that was drugged to cover my mouth. This is in accordance with what the law says about the perpetrator attempting to commit the crime against me. When Madame Sun heard this, she immediately stood up. Little b****, don't spout nonsense. Otherwise, we'll kill you when we get out. Yu Bing's eyes lit up. Officer, the suspect is still threatening me. I want to pursue this too. When the police officers present heard Yu Bing's words, they were amused by her actions. All right, I'll record your statement later. When the Sun family's mother and son finished recording their statements, the sky was already bright. Wen-Qin's case was mainly handled by the police, Yu Bing, and Xiaoxing. At the entrance of the police station, they briefly explained the possible punishment from the court. Because Sun Guo and the victim, Wen-Qin, are still married, this is considered domestic violence. However, because 2 lives were in danger and the victim also requested heavier punishment, the crime of intentional harm definitely can't be avoided. Moreover, under the misconception that the victim was dead, they absconded. Coupled with the fact that you accused him of attempted rape along with several other crimes, the court should sentence him to at least 18 to 20 years in jail. Madame Sun attempted to cover up the crimes and was the mastermind for all the crimes. She also threatened you just now, so she should be sentenced to at least 15 to 20 years in jail. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 435 Thermos. The Sun family's mother and son were completely done for now. Xiaoxing reached out and shook the old policeman's hand. I've really troubled you this time. You even accompanied us here so late at night. The old policeman smiled and said, it's not troublesome. We're supposed to serve the people. Fortunately, Miss Yu is smart and knows that this mother and son are quibblers. Before we left, she even reminded us to bring the recorder. After leaving the police station, Yu Bing and Xiaoxing went to a restaurant for breakfast and ordered chicken soup takeout to bring to the hospital. When Yu Bing and Xiaoxing entered the ward, Wen-Qin had just been pushed by a nurse to see her son, who was in an incubator. Yu Bing placed the chicken soup on the table beside the bed. Wen-Qin, I brought you chicken soup. Drink it. That day, Wen-Qin was lying in the closet with blood all over her face. When Yu Bing saw the sight, she was shocked. Although Wen-Qin wasn't breathing at that time, Yu Bing quickly dragged her out of the closet and placed her flat on the ground. It took about 5 minutes for Wen-Qin to regain her breathing. Yu Bing quickly bandaged Wen-Qin's wound. When she realized that Wen-Qin had suffered a miscarriage, she hurriedly asked her neighbor to get Xiaoxing to drive over to pick them up. When they sent Wen-Qin to the hospital in town, Wen-Qin was in a coma and the fetus in her stomach was facing possible miscarriage. Thus, the hospital requested for immediate surgery to take out the fetus. Under pressure, Yu Bing signed her name on the surgery consent slip. Fortunately, Wen-Qin was quite lucky this time. The fetus in her stomach was already 8 months old. After the C-section, the fetus was slightly larger than a kitten. The fetus's heart had stopped beating, but the medical staff still tried their best to save the fetus. It wasn't until half an hour later that the little life was finally saved. Fortunately, the baby's organs had already grown. However, because the baby was born prematurely, the baby's body was very weak and could only be placed in an incubator to recuperate. Wen-Qin only woke up at noon the day before yesterday. The first thing she did when she woke up was to ask Yu Bing to call the police for her. That was how the letter and last night's arrest came about. To Wen-Qin, Yu Bing was no longer just her savior. She was also the baby's savior. After taking the chicken soup from Yu Bing, Wen-Qin leaned against the head of the bed weakly and smiled at Yu Bing. Although I feel very embarrassed, I've already received so much kindness from you, so I won't stand on ceremony with you. You can settle the score with me after I recover. Hearing that Wen-Qin was still in the mood to joke, Yu Bing was relieved and said with a smile, "All right, I'll settle the score with you when you recover. You should take advantage of the fact that your baby hasn't come out of the incubator yet to nourish yourself now. Otherwise, when he comes out of the incubator, he won't have breast milk." Wen-Qin smiled when she heard this and lowered her head to drink the soup. At the mention of the baby, who was in the incubator, Yu Bing asked with concern, "How is the baby now? What did the doctor say?" At the mention of the child, Wen-Qin's face was filled with maternal gentleness. "He's changing every day. He's growing up every day. The doctor said that he'll stay there for another week. At the moment, the doctor hasn't noticed anything abnormal. The doctor wants him to stay in the incubator a little longer so that it can help him develop immunity to the external environment after he comes out." Yu Bing had never given birth before and knew nothing about these things. However, doctors were professionals, so listening to them was definitely the right choice. "Do whatever the doctor says. You don't have to worry about money. I'm single and without a family, so it's fine for me to lend you money." When Wen-Qin heard this, her eyes teared up a little and she raised her hand to wipe the tears from the corners of her eyes. "It's all thanks to you and Xiaoxing this time. Otherwise, the baby and I definitely would have died." Xiaoxing wasn't very familiar with Wen-Qin. Or rather, other than Yu Bing, the only girl he was familiar with was Jiang Chun. At this moment, when Xiaoxing heard Wen-Qin mention him, he comforted her. "The baby is lucky. Before the surgery, the doctor said that you were in shock for so long and lost too much blood, so you wouldn't be able to keep the child in your stomach, but we didn't expect him to be so tenacious as to survive until the doctor brought him out. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much." 436 Work Problem. When Wen-Qin thought of her youngest son, who she had seen in the incubator just now, her heart softened and she revealed a proud expression. "Yes, those nurses said that the baby is the strongest baby they've ever seen." Yu Bing watched as Wen-Qin finished the chicken soup. "Just stay here with the baby and focus on recuperating. Don't worry about the rest." A woman who had given birth had to recuperate for a month. Otherwise, if she didn't recover completely, there might be sequelae in the future. Yu Bing was worried that Wen-Qin was in a hurry to go back to work, so she specifically mentioned it. Wen-Qin also knew that she had suffered too much over the years, and if she didn't take the opportunity to recuperate, she might not be able to take good care of the two children in the future. She looked at Yu Bing with a smile as she nodded. "Don't worry, I'll definitely take good care of her this time." After chatting for a while, Yu Bing and Xiaoxing left the ward. Before they left, Xiaoxing accompanied Yu Bing to the nursery again. Through the glass window of the ward, they saw a child with Wen-Qin's name bracelet. He was as thin as a monkey and was sleeping in the incubator. When Yu Bing thought of the cool-looking young man she had seen in her previous life, she couldn't help but rejoice. This young man almost lost the chance to come to this world. Yu Bing didn't know if the dates of the baby's birth were the same in her two lifetimes or if it would affect him if they were not. However, at this point, Yu Bing only hoped that this young man's future would be smooth sailing. Now that she thought about it, Yu Bing felt that the reason the baby committed crimes in the future was most likely because of the Sun family's mother and son. Fortunately, the Sun family had already been sent to prison. If the baby and Sun Hui stayed by Wen-Qin's side, they would definitely be better off than with the Sun family's mother and son. They would probably have a different ending from that of their previous life. After the two of them left the hospital, they drove back to Yi Mountain Village. Xiaoxing turned to look at Yu Bing and asked, "What are you going to do about Yu Yan?" This was because Yu Bing had heard the confession of the Sun family's mother and son and learned from Madame Sun that the inspiration for her plan came from Yu Yan. However, Yu Yan had only mentioned it. Everyone else would think it was just an offhand remark, but people like Yu Bing and Xiaoxing, who knew the inside story, naturally wouldn't believe that. However, Yu Yan had learned her lesson this time. After she secretly sowed discord, not only could she achieve her goal, but they also couldn't find any evidence against her. On the way back, Yu Bing already thought of how to deal with Yu Yan. She raised her eyebrows and glanced at Xiaoxing with a smile. "I think she's causing trouble because she's too idle. In that case, I'll find something for her to do." When Xiaoxing saw the naughty expression on Yu Bing's face, he smiled dotingly and said, "Call me if you need me." Yu Bing nodded. After getting out of the car, she went to find Shuya to find out more about the situation. After receiving a lot of information, Yu Bing went to look for Feng Kai. Feng Kai, do you know that Yu Yin borrowed money? Feng Kai often went on business trips now and didn't know much about the situation in the dormitory building. I really didn't know. Why? Yu Bing sneered and said she might have been too idle recently, so she started to find trouble with me again. If I don't fight back, she'll think she can do whatever she wants. When Feng Kai heard this, he immediately understood why Yu Bing was looking for him and he asked tactfully, "What do you want to do?" After Yu Bing whispered her plan to Feng Kai nodded. Soon, among the young people who lent money to Yu Yin, someone heard the news from somewhere. After dinner, as everyone rested in their respective dormitories, Li Jin rushed into the dormitory. "Qian Hao, I heard that something happened to Yu Yan's parents at work, so she hasn't received the money sent by her family yet. You'd better confirm with her. 9 yuan is not a small amount. If anything bad happened to someone working in a government agency, they would be transferred to a different position at best. At worst, they would be fired and publicly condemned." When Qian Hao heard this, he panicked a little. Not only did he not have a single cent on him, but he also owed the villagers money for treatment. "Where did you hear the news from? Is the news reliable? Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much." 437 Business Trip. Li Jin picked up the teapot on the table and took a big gulp of water. "I overheard Zhao Wen and Wen Sun saying that they plan to ask Yu Yin." Qian Hao hesitated for a moment when he heard this. "The answer will be the same no matter who asks. I'll ask them after they ask Yu Yin." Li Jin nodded. "Be careful. Don't be the last to know everything." Li Jin didn't want to add insult to injury. He just felt that no matter what, as a creditor, Qian Hao had to at least know the truth. If something really happened to Yu Yan's family, Yu Yan should come up with a plan to repay the money. Li Jin knew Qian Hao's family's situation. This amount of money wasn't a small amount to him. Qian Hao knew that Li Jin was reminding him out of goodwill, so he smiled and replied, "I understand." On the other side, Zhao Wen and Wen Sun had already reached the entrance of Yu Yan's dormitory. The dormitory door was open, and Yu Yan and Su Ling were inside. Zhao Wen called out softly, "Yu Yan, I have something to ask you." Yu Yan was lying on the bed while writing to her adoptive parents. Recently, she had not been able to contact anyone, so she was a little flustered. This had never happened before. Yu Yan couldn't contact them even after calling them a few times. Yu Yan couldn't help but wonder if her adoptive parents were looking for an excuse not to pick up the phone to force her to return to the city. However, the more they were like this, the more Yu Yan didn't want to go back. Yu Yan could only write a letter as a last-ditch effort now. Yu Hai and his wife were almost 50 years old and couldn't be contacted now, but Yu Yan had never thought that something might have happened to her adoptive parents' health. She was only worried that she wouldn't be able to continue getting money from her adoptive parents. When Yu Yan heard someone call her, she looked up. When she saw Zhao Wen and Wen Sun, her heart skipped a beat. She looked at Su Ling, who was looking at her, then stood up and walked out of the room with a smile. "I haven't seen you guys for a few days. I happen to have something to look for you guys for." With that, she signaled for the two of them to follow her. At this time, there was definitely no one in the kitchen, so Yu Yan brought the two of them to the kitchen to talk. After Zhao Wen and Wen Sun exchanged looks, they looked at Yu Yan, who was smiling at them. Zhao Wen took the initiative to ask, "Yu Yan, the first half of September is almost over. Have your parents returned from their business trip?" Yu Yan smiled as she replied, "Not yet. They're on a business trip for a long time this time. I contacted their colleagues, who said that something cropped up at the place where they were on a business trip, so they're delayed." When Zhao Wen saw Yu Yan's calm expression, he suspected the authenticity of the news. However, he still asked, "Yu Yan, are things going well for your parents in the workplace?" Yu Yan was a little stunned when she heard this. "Pretty well. Why do you ask?" When Zhao Wen saw Yu Yan's confused expression, he didn't know if Yu Yan was pretending and glanced at Wen Sun. He was a little unsure if he should continue asking. If the information was wrong, it would be rude of them to ask directly. Wen Sun could see the hesitation in Zhao Wen's eyes. He thought about how Zhao Wen's family was better off than his. Zhao Wen could afford the delay, but Wen Sun couldn't. "Yu Yan, I heard that something happened to your parents at their workplace." Yu Yan frowned when she heard this. However, even she couldn't help but believe it. Usually, her adoptive parents would take the initiative to send her letters. She would reply depending on her mood. Sometimes, she would only reply to 2 or 3 letters, but her adoptive parents would still send her letters happily. 2 or 3 letters a month was the least. Now that she thought about it, they had not contacted her for more than a month. However, no matter how flustered Yu Yan was, she couldn't show it now. Otherwise, if they were worried that she couldn't return the money and caused a commotion, her reputation would be ruined. In fact, ever since Yu Yin slandered Yu Bing and was detained, no one had a good impression of her anymore. However, they were still living together after all, so everyone still had to maintain a polite pretense and they greeted Yu Yin as usual. Yu Yin assumed that everyone's opinion of Yu Bing was the same as her own. Although there was no evidence, she assumed that they couldn't stand Yu Bing hanging out with a man all day long. Yu Yin pretended to be angry and replied, "Who started the rumors? Nothing happened to my parents. They just went on a business trip." Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 438 Eavesdropping. When Zhao Wan and Wen Sun saw that Yu Yan's reaction didn't seem fake, they felt that the news might really be wrong. After all, they had accidentally heard someone mutter it and they didn't see who said it. Seeing this, Zhao Wan and Wen Sun comforted her. Someone might have been mistaken. Yu Yin believed that no one would spread such news for no reason. This was clearly targeted at her, so she frowned and asked, "Where did you guys hear this news from?" The two shook their heads. "We didn't see the person who spoke either." When Yu Yin heard this, she confirmed her guess. After sending Zhao Wan and Wen Sun away, she returned to the dormitory with a heavy heart. However, these two young men were not the only ones who received this news. The others also came to look for Yu Yin in the next 2 days. Although Zhao Wan and the other two had already asked Yu Yin, they were nervous about their money. They were not smitten with Yu Yin like Qian Hao was, so they naturally had to ask Yu Yin personally. They only stopped asking after getting the answer that Yu Yan's family was fine. Su Ling, who was in the same dormitory, saw all of this. After someone came looking for Yu Yin again, Su Ling finally couldn't hold back her curiosity and quietly followed them to see what they were talking about. When Yu Yin returned to the dormitory, she saw Su Ling looking at her with a gloating expression. Yu Yin rolled her eyes at Su Ling and returned to her bed. When Su Ling saw that Yu Yin still looked as condescending as ever, anger surged in her heart. She sat up and said sarcastically, "I wonder if anyone has heard of the saying that a fallen phoenix is inferior to a chicken. You're already in such a state, yet you still look down on others. I was wondering why I didn't see you bring back any letters and packages after so long. Turns out that something happened to your family." As soon as she said this, coupled with Su Ling's difference in attitude before she left, Yu Yin knew that the other party must have eavesdropped on her just now. "Su Ling, stop spouting nonsense. You're a city dweller after all, but you actually eavesdropped on me. I think you've really been assimilated by the rural people after staying here for so many years. You've also become a true rural woman." Su Ling was furious when she heard this. She hated being called a rural person the most. She put the book aside. "Yu Yin, what are you still so smug about? Your cabinet has long become empty. Didn't you buy meat every few days in the past? You haven't eaten meat for an entire week now, right?" With that, Su Ling smiled at Yu Yin smugly. "Your current life isn't even as good as mine. If it weren't for your wealthy family, who in the youth dormitory would even talk to you? You're just keeping up appearances now. I want to see how long you can be smug for. Without money, you're nothing." Yu Yin gritted her teeth. Of course, she knew that the people around her were all trying to get benefits from her, so she couldn't refute Su Ling's words. Yu Yin felt enraged, so she criticized Su Ling for what she cared about the most. "So what? My parents are on a business trip, so they can't be bothered to send me money. Yet this is all you can do in this life. Isn't your family misogynistic? Your parents only use the money on your brother. Just be prepared to stay in the countryside for the rest of your life. Do you still want to wait for the return policy? It's been so many years, but I've only seen people coming from the city to the countryside. How many people can return to the city from the countryside? If you don't have connections, you'll have to do hard labor for the rest of your life. I don't want to go back for the time being. As long as I'm willing to go back, my parents will immediately pull strings." For these intellectuals, the most important thing was to return to the city and continue to be city dwellers. Although many people had been working in the fields every day in order to survive all these years and seemed to be resigned to their fate on the surface, that was only to make themselves feel better. In fact, most of them had never given up. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so many young people still insisting on not marrying the villagers. It was one thing to look down on them, but most importantly, once they got married, they would be trapped in the countryside and there was a high chance that they wouldn't be able to return to the city in the future. When Su Ling saw the smug expression on Yu Yan's face and heard Yu Yan say that she would be a farmer for the rest of her life, her eyes widened in anger as she stood up and pounced on Yu Yan. "You be asterisk TCH. I'm going to tear your mouth apart." Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 439 Draw. Yu Yin raised her hand to block the attack and flung Su Ling's hand aside as she scolded angrily. Su Ling, are you crazy? Do you really think I don't dare to provoke you? Su Ling was so angry that she raised her leg and kicked Yu Yan's thigh. Damn *TCH, if your parents really become radicals, forget about staying in the dormitory building or staying in the village. Just wait to stay in the cowshed at the edge of the village. You still want them to pull strings for you? Dream on. You said that I can't go back, but I think you're the one who can't go back. Su Ling cursed as she pinched the soft flesh on Yu Yan's body. Yu Yan wasn't to be outdone. She was taller and stronger than Su Ling, so she pulled Su Ling's hair and slapped her. Although Su Ling dodged in time, Yu Yan's long nails still left 5 bloody marks on her neck. Yu Yan was also a little agitated and attacked even more ruthlessly than before. If things were really as Su Ling said, her life would be over. My parents aren't rebels. You're slandering them and spreading rumors. I'm going to report you. As Su Ling fought back, she continued to provoke Yu Yan. Although she didn't know why Yu Yan hated Yu Bing so much, she just knew that the two of them didn't get along. Psst. You still have the nerve to mention slandering and spreading rumors. Why? Did you learn this move from Yu Bing? Why don't you take a look at yourself? Can you compare to her? Don't imitate her, lest you become a laughingstock. The two of them took turns attacking each other. They had been roommates who lived together for a year, so the two of them knew each other's weaknesses and sore spots very well. Both sides became tired, but they only reached a draw in the end. After the two of them knew that they couldn't gain anything from the other party, they tacitly chose to stop fighting. One of them had red marks all over her neck and face, and her hair was disheveled. The other one had internal injuries. The places where she had been pinched were all covered by her clothes. Only her clothes were wrinkled on the surface, but she was in pain. Su Ling glared at Yu Yan. Then, she opened the cabinet and started to pack her things. Before she opened the door and left, she turned around to look at Yu Yan and she gritted her teeth as she said fiercely, just you wait. I won't let you off easy. Once Su Ling left, the entire dormitory would belong to Yu Yan. Thinking of how even Su Ling was forced away by her, Yu Yan felt very smug. However, very quickly, Yu Yan's mood plummeted again. Although she had been denying Su Ling's words just now, she couldn't help but think in the direction the other party had said. She even thought about her adoptive brother's job. Could he have been implicated by her adoptive parents? Otherwise, why couldn't she contact him? Yu Yan lay on the bed, but she couldn't sleep soundly. Thinking of the treatment she would suffer after becoming a child of rebels, Yu Yan felt a little flustered. She hesitated about writing a letter to sever ties and sending it to her adoptive parents' agency to express her attitude so that she wouldn't be locked up because of her adoptive parents. However, on second thought, they had lost contact for more than a month. If something really happened, after making so many calls back, her adoptive parents' colleagues would definitely reveal a little. Didn't Auntie Jiang, who answered the call, have a very good relationship with her adoptive mother? However, she didn't hear anything from her. At the thought of this, Yu Yan calmed down a little. She felt that she shouldn't scare herself by letting her imagination run wild. She tossed and turned until midnight before falling asleep. When Yu Yan got up the next morning, she realized that the bruises on her body from last night were aching. She slowly sat up and began to put on her clothes. When she finally tidied up and was about to wash up, she heard some voices outside the door, but they were too soft for her to hear what was being said. After Yu Yan opened the door curiously, she saw that everyone who had borrowed her money had appeared at the dormitory door and the voices of discussion disappeared. Yu Yan was shocked by the scene in front of her and she had an uneasy feeling, but she forced a smile at everyone. You guys. The 9 boys looked at each other. In the end, when Sun stood up and said with a smile, Yu Yan, I need money urgently now. Can you think of a way to return it to me first? You don't have to give me candy or biscuits. We're all intellectuals from the city, so it's only right for us to help each other. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much. 440 Sewing Discord. With one person taking the lead, the others began to voice their requests as well. However, everyone's goal was the same, which was to urge Yu Yan to return the money. Yu Yan was a little angry and embarrassed. Didn't I say that I'll return it to you guys after my parents send me money from their business trip? At this moment, a boy stood up and went straight to the point. Yu Yan, I heard that a problem arose at your parents' workplace. It was this excuse again. Before Yu Yan went to bed last night, she had already made up her mind. As long as there was no confirmation, she would insist that it was just a business trip. She really didn't have money now, so she could only delay it for as long as possible. Yu Yan began to look impatient. Who told you that there was a problem with my parents' workplace? This is a rumor. I want to settle the score with whoever started the rumor. Everyone looked at each other. When they heard that Yu Yin was going to cause trouble, they didn't dare to say who they had heard it from. Otherwise, if she told them out of kindness but they sold her out, that would be immoral. Seeing this, Wen Sun also walked forward and explained, Yu Yin, we didn't say that we would force you to return all the money immediately. Perhaps you can pay a portion first? Return as much as you can. See how long it will take for you to return the rest. Come up with a plan and tell us. Then, we'll be more assured. That's right. Return as much as you can. Or, find some stamps or some things you don't need. You can sell them and exchange them for money to return to us. There were some murmurs in the crowd. Because there were many people, Yu Yin didn't know who was talking. Yu Yin had some valuable stamps that could be sold for more than 10 yuan. However, she planned to send them to the Yu family, so she definitely couldn't sell them. Yu Yin looked at everyone in exasperation and began to condemn the person who had instigated them to look for her. I really don't have anything to exchange for money now. Who told you all of this? I can confront that person face to face. If that person doesn't even dare to show his face, why do you guys believe him? Yu Yin wasn't even sure if something had happened to her adoptive parents or not. Speaking of which, she wasn't lying, so she wasn't afraid of confronting the other party. Thus, her tone became much tougher. When everyone heard this, they were speechless. They really couldn't refute Yu Yan's words. When Su Ling, who was hiding in the corner, saw that Yu Yan had the upper hand, she stomped her feet in anger. How incompetent! Seeing that the group of men seemed to be persuaded by Yu Yan, Su Ling couldn't help but rush out and shout, Yu Yan, you have the cheek to say that you don't have stamps? You can lie to others, but I've lived with you for so long. How can I not know? Su Ling rushed to the middle of the crowd and continued, don't be deceived by Yu Yan. I saw a few clothing stamps and cotton stamps in her hand a few days ago. She just wants to shirk the debt. Now that Su Ling had appeared, Yu Yan's first reaction was that all the rumors were spread by Su Ling. Su Ling, this is our private matter. If you have something against me, don't manipulate other people. Yu Yan deliberately turned the matter into a private grudge between the two women so that everyone would think that Su Ling had ulterior motives for telling them that. Su Ling knew that Yu Yan was sharp-tongued, so she didn't say anything else and pushed Yu Yan away. Then, she picked up the scissors on the desk and was about to pry open the lock of Yu Yan's closet. Seeing this, Yu Yan was so frightened that she went forward and pushed her away. Su Ling, what are you trying to do? Do you want to snatch my things in front of so many people? Su Ling looked at Yu Yan and sneered. You also know that there are so many people here? I just want everyone to see if there are stamps in your closet or not. I want to expose your true colors. Besides, if you're not lying, open it for everyone to see. What are you afraid of? Yu Yan blocked the cabinet. Stop sowing discord. I haven't even settled the account with you for slandering my parents. Su Ling snorted. You haven't contacted your parents for more than a month, right? What rumors did I spread? I only told everyone what I knew truthfully. They guessed that something happened to your parents. Don't try to pin the blame on me. On the other hand, you made yourself sound so pitiful. Show us the evidence. You don't even dare to let us see the closet. It can be seen how diffident you are. I didn't sow discord. You're the one who let everyone down. Subscribe and read more novel to help us update chapter quickly. Thank you so much.